Well, welcome everyone welcome to everything you ever wanted to know about depaving. My name is Franz Hartmann. I'm with Unflood Ontario. It's a collaborative of community foundations across around Lake Ontario, and over 50 organizations and businesses across Southern Ontario dedicated to unflood Ontario by installing more natural infrastructure. And if you want to learn more about Unflood Ontario, please visit us at unfloodontario.ca. This evening's event is co-sponsored by Green Venture and Green Up Peterborough. Green Venture empowers Hamiltonians to implement greener practices in their homes and communities, and to make makes Hamilton a climate champion. Green Up is Peterborough region's leading organization focused on climate action, environmental education, and community resilience. And as the title of this evening's webinar suggests, this is all about depaving, also known as replacing hard surfaces with permeable surfaces. And most of the next hour will be spent answering your questions about depaving. But before we get to your questions, we're going to have a short introduction to depaving. And before we get to that, let me say a few words about the land I am on and the land you are on. As we stay at home together, we want to recognize that the City of Toronto, where I am, is situated on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. If you're outside of Toronto and are unfamiliar with the territories upon which you reside, I invite you to learn more by checking out native-land.ca. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I acknowledge the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous peoples and recognize their role as stewards of this land. And I encourage all of you to consider the land you reside on and to acknowledge the enduring presence and resilience of Indigenous peoples and their role as stewards of this land. As you know, this evening is all about depaving, and we couldn't have two better people to help guide us. I would like to introduce our experts now. Helena Cousins is a program coordinator at Green Venture. She mainly works on green infrastructure related programming and has been the lead coordinator of local Deepave Paradise projects for the past year. Heather Ray is Director of Programs at Green Up. She's a certified rain garden designer and has been doing that since 2016. Heather has led a number of education and action programs in Peterborough and the area, focused on green infrastructure, water, and neighborhood action planning, with Deepave Paradise being the heart of this work. Welcome, Helena, and welcome, Heather. And before we get to your questions, I want to turn things over to Heather to give us a short introduction on depaving. Heather, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Franz. I am just going to share my screen because I did come prepared with some photos. And I just wanted to share a little bit with you all about the background of the program called Deepave Paradise that Helena and I both deliver in our perspective communities. So bear with me here a moment as my computer decides to freeze. Here we go. So we've been depaving in Peterborough, or also known as Nokajinawang, since 2014, and that's really when the Deepave Paradise program took off. It is a project of Green Communities Canada, which Green Venture and Green Up and many other organizations are delivery agents for. And Green Communities Canada is a national organization that brought Deepave Paradise over to Ontario, to Canada, from the United States, where it began in Portland. So some of the concerns that made a lot of us interested, especially for myself here in Peterborough, in doing more with Deepave, also on the cusp of green infrastructure in general, is these general concerns that many of you probably feel in your own communities, such as extreme weather events, increasing flooding, both isolated flooding events and more widespread flooding events, drought, or perhaps more heat. We're definitely feeling that here in Peterborough over the last few years. We've had drought, at least a drought level 1 condition every year since 2016. And we're also really concerned here about our water quality and availability. And so thinking about what is causing some of those concerns, what is this underlying pinning, is asphalt. So the whole basis of the Deepave concept is to restore our natural hydrological cycle, which is impeded by asphalt. And I just want to stress that Deepave Paradise by no means is trying to make asphalt a bad person. We don't want to bring on any hate for asphalt, but if there's asphalt that's not being used, if it doesn't make sense for it to be there, do we need it there, or is there a greener option? So asphalt itself, rain falls on it, it picks up a lot of pollutants, and that goes right into our storm drains, which for many municipalities, especially here in Peterborough, does not get treated before it enters our local waterways. So Green Communities Canada likes to say, and I use this a lot, the things to think about when we want to make a positive impact to the landscape is think about how do we slow water down, how do we soak water up, and how do we do that to keep it clean? And Deepave is one of those programs that does all 3 of those things. So enter Deepave. It is literally a program that removes asphalt, liberates soil, and we leave that space planted in native species. We have done a number of different landscapes that we've left behind, such as a rain garden. We've done a bioswale, we've done eco rosters, we've done just a beautiful garden. There's no rhyme or reason as long as it's green and absorbent. It's really educational. So the pinning of Deepave Paradise that I find really exciting is its educational properties. So we get people together and we cut up asphalt. These amazing, strong volunteers come, and it's their favorite part. Sometimes they joke and tell us that they should pay us money just for the ability to kind of work out outside, like a gym fee. And we pull up that asphalt by hand. And the reason we do that, and we hear this a lot, why do we do it by hand and why don't we have machines do it? It's for that educational purpose, so that we can have people, even through COVID, through a flurry of health and safety protocols, we were still able to Deepave and bring people together in a way that they could talk about asphalt, talk about permeable surfaces, learn about species, learn about the benefits to our water, but also to our local planning processes, to our habitat, and to our community building. So in Peterborough, we have Deepaved 8 separate sites. We have Deepaved outside of businesses. We have Deepaved municipal property. Recently, we Deepaved a road segment. That was a road to nowhere, so to say. That was the largest Deepave at almost 800 square meters, so one chunk of space. The township of Tiny, ironically, has beat us at that now. And as you can see, it's just a beautiful way of creating space. The top right-hand corner, that is a project that we've been doing with our downtown business improvement area. And it's an art project. So if you're ever into Peterborough, again, swing by that corner, and there's a beautiful painted canoe by a local Anishinaabe artist that we incorporated into that design as well. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to answering all your questions.
Thank you, Heather, for a great overview of what the Deepave Paradise program looks like, especially in Peterborough. And this evening is really about depaving on where you live. If you're a property owner, it can be depaving on your property. It can be depaving in your community. It can be depaving in your municipality. There are so many opportunities for depaving, and this evening is really all about helping you learn what you need to move forward with depaving. So now it's time to answer your questions, and I invite you to enter your questions in the Zoom chat. I know some of you have already done that. Please, right now, go into the chat function, put a question in there. If you are unable to use the chat function, please consider using the reactions icon. Just click that on and raise your hand. And when your turn comes, Abby Branchflower from the Small Change Fund, she will ask you to ask your questions. You can just unmute yourself at that point. And we'll go from there. So now it's time to answer your questions. So let me turn it over to my colleague, Abby. Abby, what's the first question on chat?
So our first question is from Sylvia, and she asked if there's any interest in the Ford government to support more environmentally friendly paving.
Great question. I'm not sure that's a Heather or Helena question. I don't know how much you're following provincial policies. If either of you do know the answer to that, I would love to hear it. If not, I will hazard to give a guess.
Yeah, Franz, you may know more about that with the provincial level of optics that you have. I do know if you check our newly updated provincial policy statement, green infrastructure is heavily promoted. And so we will be seeing, most likely, municipalities taking on more green infrastructure projects, but what that looks like in terms of actual asphalt type in my community is still up for debate.
Helena, any thoughts on that?
No, I was just going to add that the Deepav Paradise program is funded by Ontario Trillium Foundation. So not sure when that bit of funding started, but that's there as well. But yeah, I know within our municipality in Hamilton, there is a lot, we call it low impact development. That's another term for green infrastructure here. It is written many times in the stormwater management plan, and we are currently waiting for an update on that. So,
yeah. And I can add, as somebody who does keep track of this, the provincial government definitely does not impede green infrastructure and is not putting up roadblocks to depaving or using more environmentally friendly or better sort of pavement. But I'm not aware of any programs that specifically help municipalities and or individuals or communities to do depaving. I will say at the federal level, the federal government did announce funding for a national infrastructure fund. That happened in May of this year. Exactly how that money is going to be spent is a big question mark. But I think that the question gets at the importance of ensuring that governments are helping people engage in depaving and also in natural infrastructure. And I can say this because we don't get any government funding. I urge you to contact your local officials, in particular your councillors and your mayor, because usually municipalities have the biggest role in paving because they're responsible for transportation systems. I urge you to contact them and ask them to support natural infrastructure, in particular depaving. With that, let's go to the next question, Abby.
The next question is, do you have any suggestions for building support in a smaller, less environmentally conscious community? And that's from a different Abby.
Maybe I'll hand that over to Heather. Maybe you can just speak briefly about how did Green Up kind of help build support for the depaving program in Peterborough.
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think that's a question even that we very recently stumbled upon as well. So our very last Deepav project, which we're actually still just finishing up, is in the township of Selwyn. So it's the first time we went outside of the city of Peterborough and went into a smaller community where we had never depaved before. And it is tricky to grab the traction. It is tricky to get people excited and to get people understanding why we want to do this. And I do find that after that very first project, once folks come together and you're like, oh, that's what you meant. Oh, that I like. All of a sudden we had people and site hosts contacting us in a flurry, because now everybody also wants to host a Deepave site. The recommendation that I would have is really just to start where people are, see where the priorities are for that community and people within them. Maybe water itself isn't the priority. Perhaps there hasn't been a lot of flooding. So try to think about where that connection can be. And in a project like Deepave, when you're talking about creating more green infrastructure, there's so many compounded benefits. So I find it's usually quite easy to find that one thing that people are really interested in. And there's always a connection. So is that health? Is that having more shade in that community? Deepave can help with that. Removing asphalt can help with that. Is it money? Is it insurance purposes? Is it people wanting to protect their property? Is it beautification? Is it pollinators? There's so many different connections. So really just get to know what it is that your community is wanting to solve. What is that problem that they're having that people are really motivated around, and start there.
Helena, anything to add?
No, I think that was a great answer, and I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay. Abby, next question, please.
What is the impact on the aggregate companies of depaving? And that's again from Sylvia.
Do you want me to jump in, Helena? I would love to hear what Hamilton's experience has been in that. For Peterborough, surprisingly, the aggregate companies are one of our first supporters. So Cocoa Paving has donated their time for us a number of times. Interestingly enough, we've had to have them lay asphalt for us around the edges. Sometimes things get really crumbly, and they've really helped us make sure that our projects are a success, because I think the key with depaving and the key with that messaging that we really try to strive on is that we're not talking about taking parking spaces away. We're not talking about trying to demonize asphalt. Asphalt has played a really significant role in the growth of our landscapes in our urban settings. Gray infrastructure was huge, and there's still a need for it. And so having those conversations with our aggregate companies have been really successful in ensuring that we're on the same page of understanding and that we're working together, so that we can say, no, yeah, a parking spot, an accessible pathway makes a lot of sense if that needs to be impervious. But if there's other options, then let's try those too. Yeah, Helena, what has your experience been?
Yeah, I don't think there's really any negative impact on them. Like, we, at least as a small NGO, are not depaving on any scale that's gonna even like affect them in the slightest. The contractor who we're working with on the current Deepave project even brought up, like, you know, how does it make you feel that for like 100 meters square that you're ripping up, like just like thousands, millions more are being laid down at the same time? And I was like, well, not great, but it is the environmental aspect that we really tried to bring out in these projects. And another aspect of the Deepave Paradise program is, you know, we're looking at places that are, as you mentioned, underused and in poor conditions. So, you know, these were paved at one point for a purpose, but they're not really serving that purpose anymore. And maybe they're even a tripping hazard. So, you know, what can we do with those spaces that are neglected? You know, we try not to do depaves on like brand new laid asphalt because that's wasteful, you know? So yeah, I would say it's more of a partnership than anything. And those companies do have, you know, the ethical components, and they need to do their green and nonprofit support as well, because they're big companies. So they're happy to partner with us.
And I'll just add to, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Fran, sorry to interrupt. I was going to say in our cases too, when it comes to the asphalt disposal, it all goes back to a recycling facility where companies then are reusing the asphalt for other spaces. In one of our largest depaves, we were depaving the road section, and just right down the road, Cocoa Paving was redoing the road right beside us. It was this great dichotomy of out and in. But like Helena said, it's a great partnership. And I'm finding now too, we had a long time where folks were really interested in having permeable concrete options, so eco-ruster or the concrete or other options that can still be looking like a paved surface, but with permeability. And it's some of those companies that we first started working with who understand the value in this, who are those first ones who are going for that training, who are now offering those products in a larger scale. So I'm hopeful that our depaving work has been helping the industry be able to diversify a little bit.
Great, thank you. Abby, next question, please.
So Mike asked, how do you overcome local municipalities' objections regarding higher maintenance costs attributed to green solutions?
Helena, why don't you take a first jab at that? Because I suspect both you and Heather have answers.
Yes, so that is a great question. I think we have recently depaved on city property. It's a bit more challenging, obviously, than depaving on private property, because in our case, it was city right of ways. So they do, want to keep that space as their own property in case they need to do anything with the road. But I think in this case specifically, the building owner of the adjacent building really wanted to do something green with that space. So it was helpful to all partner together with like these agreements that we have that say, Green Venture is going to do this kind of work, and these are all the benefits. And then the space is going to be maintained by the adjacent building owner and volunteers and things like that. So it's actually less work for the municipality in that case, if you have parties signing on that are saying, we want to be stewards of this space. And then also, it does help them in a way, because I think, they have targets for green infrastructure on city property. So it's good to have people come in and support that work for them, I think.
Heather, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think maintenance is always a concern, and how these are going to be maintained. And that's often a pushback that we still hear as well, is this space is going to take a lot more to maintain. And really, for us in Peterborough, what we've done with Depaving is really incorporated this type of program into a bigger strategic plan that we have in terms of how to promote green infrastructure within the city. So it's not going to happen overnight. It takes years and years. And we're talking about, different budgets and different people who are going to be responsible for different things. But when we get everyone together and we just keep pulling the municipality closer as a closer partner, I've been finding, it's been my experience, that things are getting a lot easier now. So, for example, a lot of municipalities do not have a stormwater fee to help maintain a lot of infrastructure. Yet their costs when there's a flood can be astronomical. And of course, that comes from a different budget. So we really often talk about those financial gains from incorporating green infrastructure a little bit more and from depaving. So we're coming in as an organization with a grant to cover the cost of the installation. It's an investment towards other goals that they have, like Helena said, urban canopy increases. If they have other goals for water maintenance or for water management, then we can help align with those goals. And then we just talk a lot about the financial cost of having the asphalt versus the financial gain of having this green space left behind. We also put together really comprehensive management plans for this space. And we do training with municipal staff as well, so that they know how to care for it. And we do that again with lots of other site hosts as well. But I agree with Helena, we've had the best long-term success of spaces that are being maintained by businesses or by a local homeowner. So sometimes that can be the way to go, especially if it's your first demonstration project.
Great, thank you. Abby, next question, please.
Great. So in a similar vein, how do you get your city on board? And that's from Abby.
I do want to say that that's pretty similar to the last one.
Mhm.
I don't know if do you want to add anything to that one, or in the interest of time, did we kind of touch on that? Partnerships and maintenance, I would say, are the biggest two things. Yeah.
If there's nothing to add, the next question is, how have you dealt with a municipality or business owner's concern about naturalized areas being messy or becoming messy over time? And that's from Liz.
Me and Heather just looking at each other like, who's gonna go? I think we can definitely talk about this one because that is a common issue among naturalized gardens. And I think what Green Venture really tries to do with our work is try to find that balance between, like supporting native species, but also looking neat, because otherwise, there's a lot of people who are going to think it just looks like weeds and it's not going to be appealing to a huge chunk of the population. So we've depaved in quite a few different areas, many of which are, just different conditions that will allow native plants to kind of take over and really get out of hand, especially if they're not being maintained regularly. So we've kind of struck a balance there with putting some native plants in. We work with an amazing landscape architect, and she does use lots of cultivars, native cultivars. So they grow to a fraction of the size of that native plant. And some might be a little bit more hardy and things like that. And I know that is sometimes controversial for native plant gardens, but in this case, or in many cases, we have to look at, especially if it's on city property, how's it going to look over time, and be a little bit realistic. And, we want them to look good. We want them to be an example for what, something people want to do and that we want to see more of. So, if it's looking, yeah, I'll cut myself off there. How do you add to that?
I think that's great. What we've really been striving to do and incorporate into our Deepaves as of recent years is the concept of co-design or participatory designing. So we do our own garden designs in-house, and that's because we have the privilege of having a social enterprise associated with our organization, which is a native market, so a native plant market. So all of our species are native, and we start the co-design process with really highlighting what is messy. What does that mean? Why do you see that as messy, but you don't see periwinkle as messy? Because ecologically, periwinkle is very messy as an invasive plant. So we talk a little bit about that, why the plants matter, why we need those deep root structures, what they're actually doing foundationally in the garden. And so I find that once folks are like, oh, okay, it's the roots that we're really needing to think about. And then we kind of talk about, okay, well, what looks nice to you? Like, what are some examples of things that you like? We kind of workshop it together. We have done garden designs where it's just grass. It's a boulevard. And so, they don't want a bunch of messy asters, so to say. So we stick to grasses, perhaps, in that space. We've done others where we incorporate a lot of rock, and we did a lot of hard edges, a lot of kind of graphics. And we did a lot of creeping junipers and different kind of ground covers to kind of make it look more modern, so to say. So I feel like things can be done in the design aspect of that as well to make it look a little more contained. And then also, yeah, I think starting in this participatory kind of co-place where we all come together, talk about what we like, incorporate that in design as much as possible, and really lead towards the education of what are native species, why do they look messy, but why do we need that messiness? And we've been able to link that to a lot of our other programs that we offer the community, so that it's a bit, those kind of messages are coming at folks from different angles. But I recognize that that's not always possible for everybody.
Thank you for that. Next question, Abby.
All right. I couldn't hear you there, Franz, but I'm going to move on to the next
Yes,
question.
next question, please. Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
I can, yes. So how does funding come about for this work? And that's a question from Abby.
That is the question. Funding. How do we pay for this work? We're always searching for funding. So if you have any leads, let us know. No, I'm joking. Sort of. The very first Deepaves were funded from different ways. So as charities, Green Communities Canada is also a charity. The Green Communities Canada applies for funding through grants. And then some of those grants support us. And then us as delivery agents, based on our own capacity and who can take on some of those actionables, are contracted by Green Communities Canada. And so we're given a chunk of that funding to see through the projects. Usually, some of our long-term funders for this project has been larger granting organizations like Ontario Chilium Foundation. Private foundations have funded the work. So have kind of other corporate community involvement programs like the Blue Water Project from RBC had been a big funder for a while as well. We also have been able to get our own funding from local Peterborough foundations and through other programs as well. So we've just recently done some schoolyard Deepaves, which have been really exciting, and worked with school boards. And so we were able to do that on our own. And then we were able to work with Green Communities Canada on delivering that program with our own funding. So funding sources for charities come from a number of different locations and different spots. When it comes to you doing it on your own, if you're a municipality or for your own project, your own community, first I recommend if you are coming from a charity or a not-for-profit organization of some sort to reach out to Green Communities Canada to see if you can link into their network. And if not, then we have had Deepaves funded by our local business association. We've had Deepaves funded by horticultural support, horticultural society grants. And we've kind of patchworked them all together at times as well. Helena, do you have any more insights on funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually a bit of like patchwork for us. You know, we've got our funding from Green Communities Canada. That really is just to pay for the project to keep running really through Green Venture. But it is definitely project specific. Like we don't have necessarily a big pot of funding other than GCC just to do Deepave projects, other than our just green infrastructure work in general. But it's usually on a per project basis. A lot of the time it will be a joint application for a specific site with our site partners or site hosts, especially if they're like a charity. And lots of our funding has come from the municipality or like Hamilton-based funding organizations. Yeah, like the Hamilton Community Foundation. And one of the ones we partnered with the BIA as well. And they applied for funding through like the TD program. So like all different chunks from many different places.
Great, thank you. And I'll also add, for those of you on this call who are thinking of depaving on your property, you can probably do that in some instances, if you just do simple depaving, it'll actually cost you less than replacing some fading concrete and or asphalt. With that, let's go to another question. And for those of you who joined a bit later, you're probably wondering why are all of these comments coming from Abby? That's because we had a little technical glitch, and when you signed on as Abby. So feel free to change the name in your where your profile, where your picture is. There's 3 blue dots. There's there's a blue box with 3 white dots in it. That opens up a menu, and you can rename yourself there. Anyway, with that, we'll go to the original and only Abby and ask for the next question.
So Kelly asked, in the Deepave projects you have worked on in the past, have the property owners reached out to you, or did you actively seek out opportunities?
I did just want to say about the last question. You brought up an interesting point, Franz, that probably some people on this call are not working for nonprofits and they're thinking about their properties. So there is, depending on your municipality, or, you know, there might be federal or provincial funding just to do stormwater projects on your home. I think that's included in the new grant, that the federal grant. So you can get rebates for maybe not necessarily depaving, but if you're doing some kind of work on your property to divert stormwater, you might be eligible for some funding. Yeah. But to this question, or sorry, Franz, were you about to comment? No? Okay. For this question, definitely a bit of both. I think that Heather mentioned this before, that you did a project and you have a bunch of other people reaching out wanting to do a depave on their property now. We've definitely seen some of that. I think closer to the beginning when I was not with Green Venture at the time, but I think there was a lot of outreach and saying, we're looking for sites to depave. These are the requirements. If you know a site, if you're interested in this project, reach out to us and then we can kind of see if it's an appropriate project, but definitely a bit of both now.
Yeah, I would say I'm similar to Helena. It really depends on what we're doing and what the angle is. So I think at Green Up, we've been a little too ambitious over the years. And so depending on what our goal is, it would just depend on how we're asking for sites to be identified. So we've started in the very beginning, we really wanted to work with other not-for-profits. So our very first depave was with Brock Mission, which is a not-for-profit, another not-for-profit that helps marginalized, I think homeless men most usually, but we did a therapy garden for them as our first depave. And then those type of locations that provided this bigger community need kind of were far and few between. So it was, you know, we were calling up our municipal planners and saying, hey, do you know a good spot? Do you know a good spot that gets a lot of flooding? You know, a good neighborhood that maybe has a lot of issues? And then we would just work the phones and see, you know, who was interested in having some solutions. But then there's been times where we've put a huge call out where we've said, hey, this is our need. We are looking for a site. This is what the site needs to have on it. We worked with our municipality. We've also worked with our business associations, and we did a huge call out, which was like, hey, here's how you apply. Email us by this date if you want in on this really exciting opportunity. And then we're flooded with applications on who wants to host the site. Other times when it's been new and it's been the school, it's definitely been, you know, somebody who's reached out to us who said, hey, we've heard about this and we want to do it. Can you come talk to our parent council? Can you come talk to, our most recent one was another not-for-profit, but it's like a subdivision, and they have a harbor within their subdivision. And so it's kind of members around that water that our board of directors. And so it all had to get approved by their board, right? So we were asked to come in and present to try to get everyone to buy into the concept. So it really depends, I think, on what you're wanting to achieve, where you're wanting to achieve that, and who you want your partners to be. Depave Paradise through Green Communities Canada had a Depave Me social media campaign going a few years ago. And so they just used a hashtag and we're like, hey, tell us where you, as just a resident, so you could hone in on a neighborhood or just your whole municipality and say, just have residents tell you where they want to see spots be depaved, that maybe there's hazards that they're dealing with that they don't want to see there anymore. Lots of different ways.
Great, thank you. Abby, next question, please.
All right, our next question is also from Kelly, and she wanted to know what barriers have you guys come across in depaving and how you overcame them?
I can kick us off, Helena, if you'd like, because our solution for this actually came from Hamilton. So one of, I would say that the biggest barrier that we have kind of just come across over and over again is health and safety. We are asking people to say yes to something that is perhaps outside of their comfort zone. We want people to be wearing steel toes, and we want them to use crowbars, and we actually want them to lift really heavy things and get dirty and do a lot of really heavy work that maybe they wouldn't have done before. Of course, there's always roles for people who physically are not able to do that type of work. So there's a diversity of options for people to choose from and how to get involved. But it's the insurance on that, it's the health and safety, it's the liability of such a project that I've seen over and over again be the first roadblock that we have to go through. And to get over that, we actually draw a lot on examples from each other. So I have pulled examples from Green Ventures time and time again. Look what they did. They did a schoolyard. They do schoolyards all the time. Look how happy those kids are. Look at all the safety stuff that was done. Look at how we all share that safety stuff and we improve it. And so because this has been done so many times already, we have this track record of precedence of they did it in that community and it went great. They didn't have any issues. Here's how they overcame that. We're going to do that same thing. Here's our plan. And then everyone says yes after that, usually.
Yes, that is definitely a barrier. And with COVID, that was a big barrier for us. I mean, and everyone for everything. But we did a couple projects just this summer, and you know, we were restricted by granting deadlines, so we couldn't really postpone it until we were allowed to have volunteers, and then it fell right within a lockdown, so we kind of just had to be creative in how we were going to engage people. Obviously the whole point of having a Depave is having volunteers there on site doing it by hand, but so it was a little bit different and a little bit less fun. And I like to think that we're making up for it with our current Depave that's going on. We just did it on Saturday, stage 1 of the project. And I would say a barrier that a lot of people face is with getting contractor support. We've had this come up in some of our Depave meetings, our Canada-wide Depave manager meetings. Contractors are often confused when we ask them to cut pavement into squares because it takes a long time, and they say, you know, we can do this in like half an hour, we can just rip it all up. So it's sometimes difficult to explain that it's about the experience. I would say that's a barrier, but usually we can come around. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other ones. I think funds are often a big barrier to depaving, funds and time and staff, because they take a long time and a lot of work to plan and to bring all the partners together and find out where funding is going to be coming from. You know, sometimes there might be a great project and no funding, and sometimes you might have funding and the project isn't moving along at the appropriate speed. So just having that all line up and work can be a challenge, but yeah, we've had great funders who are flexible if the project is moving slow, and likewise great partners who are able to make things happen. And a big part of the Depave program is securing donations from community partners, so that can be a challenge, but it is a necessary part of the project as well.
So I'm just going to interject here and ask for a slightly different or put a slightly different lens on that last question. Imagine that I'm assuming some of our people who are joining us this evening are thinking of doing depaving on their own properties. Maybe both of you could just speak very briefly to some of the challenges or barriers that might exist and how people can overcome them if they're thinking of removing some asphalt or some concrete from their own property.
One of the biggest barriers you may have right now is locates. So locates, you have to call Ontario one call to get locates done before you dig anything anywhere. And when it comes to Depave, that's going to be really important. And right now, I know they're very behind in their locates. So if you're wanting to do this right away, give yourself 6 weeks first, just to order your locates. That's always been a struggle for us. It's when we're ready to go and when there's a contractor who's available. Helena brings up the contractor. That's a great point. There isn't always somebody available for all the timing work out well. If you're kind of, wanting to do it on your own though, you don't necessarily need a contractor. You will need perhaps tools. So access to tools and muscle might be your biggest barrier at that point. So ensuring that you aren't causing any further havoc on your property will also, I think, be the third. So permits that you may need, double check with your municipality. If you're changing your slope at all, then you may need a permit for that. And if you're anywhere near a waterway, check in with your local CA to see if you need any permits from them as well. But then it might just be getting the tools that you need to cut up your asphalt or concrete, and then finding the muscle to get it hauled away, and then knowing where to take that. So for us, we were able to work with some local folks who can take the massive amount of asphalt that we pull up. You'll be surprised, it won't look like much on the ground, but once you start digging, it's a lot. So other barriers that you may come across in that project planning is knowing what you're getting yourself into ahead of time. So I recommend doing some tests first. After you have your locates, pull up a little corner of your asphalt or concrete or whatever it is you're removing and see how deep it is and what's going on underneath that as well. Those have been things that have caught us off guard a number of times, and we've had to scramble for solutions. So those could be barriers that you may not know you have until you pull up some sections.
Helena, anything to add, or should we go on to the next question?
Yeah, I would say a big barrier probably for anyone wanting to depave at home, it would be also what comes afterwards. So, if you've got an impermeable surface that's adjacent to your house, and then you're replacing it with something permeable, you need to also consider, I think Heather mentioned, the slope and things like that. So you need to ensure that the water will still be flowing away from your home and your property. So it is a challenge, I think, for a lot of people to find the time and money to research what you're going to do with that space afterwards. There's a lot of interest in replacing a hard surface with a permeable hard surface, which is just challenging on its own because there's a lot of options, but a lot of them are very new. And anytime people want to put something on their property like that, they always want proof of longevity, especially because it's going to be more expensive than asphalt most of the time. And it will require some maintenance. So I would say that you definitely need to do a little bit of research if you're thinking of installing permeables. Yeah, and then if it's a garden, that's great. But again, just being aware of the slope and how much water is going to be running into that space. And keeping your foundation in mind as well.
Great. So I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions. So Abby, if there's a way of consolidating or if there's similar questions, maybe just bundling them together. If not, we'll just take the next two and stop it at that. Next question, please.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for homeowners for making driveways and walkways permeable? So kind of similar there, but are there any recommendations for that?
I'm really excited about this. I'm going to jump right in. I have talked about this with many people for many times. And Deepave, actually, we talked about doing like driveways, like Deepave your driveway as a whole program. Right now, as it sits, the benefit of redoing your entire driveway into a permeable surface may not be that great. So research is suggesting a lot of our permeable products are still they're still new, as Helena said, right? We don't have people necessarily in all communities who are installing them. And so they do need a little more maintenance. And so the research is still suggesting different ways of tweaking that. What I've been advised, and what I'm really excited about, is as a first step, to at least perhaps modify your driveway so that the water coming off of your asphalt is not just going into the storm drain. And you can do that by creating a trench at the end of your driveway, depending on your slope. And so capturing that, putting in perhaps a rain garden beside your driveway. You can dig a trench actually into your driveway and put a grate on top and have that slope. So you're capturing that water and putting it somewhere else might be the best first step. And keeping it really simple. So again, like maybe we need to rethink what driveways look like. Does it need to be replaced with permeable concrete, or do you want to take out all that asphalt and then maybe just have a couple, like 2 strips of pavers, right? Those temporary pavers. And then underneath your car, strawberries, right? Wild strawberry and yarrow everywhere. And maybe it doesn't need to look like a traditional driveway at all. So just really keep it simple. And just focus on the need of the water first and foremost would be my advice for that.
Helena, anything to add?
I was just gonna say that tire strip thing, I was thinking about that earlier, something we don't see a ton in Southern Ontario, but it's one of my favorite things because, you know, you're still working with the same materials, just less. And it's less money to put in as well. Oh, yeah. I know we're short on time.
We are, and boy, did that hour go fast.
Yes.
Thanks. I know there's a number of other questions that haven't been answered, and I'm going to invite the people who have put those into contact us to info@smallchangefund.ca. And what we will do is we'll try to get them. Well, we will get them to Helena and Heather, and they'll do their best to respond. Sorry, go ahead, Helena.
I was just going to say, I noticed that the next question is there an organization like Deepave in Toronto? And I feel like we can answer that really quickly. Like the Deepave Paradise program is a national program. And if you go onto the website, deepaveparadise.ca, you can see all the projects that have happened and the local delivery agents.
Yeah. With that, before I make my final wrap-up comments, I want to give Helena and Heather an opportunity to make any final comments on what you've heard today and any advice you may have to people that you haven't already given. And I'll start with you, Helena.
Yeah, no, I think that some of these questions are really great. I'm not sure if most of the people here are interested in depaving in their community or on their property, but I would start by looking into your local organization like Green Venture, Green Up. Chances are there's a program that they have that is green infrastructure related, and they probably have local resources that can either help you out in either by information or like rebates, funding for projects, things like that.
Heather.
Great. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share all of this this really fun stuff that I've been able to spend my last 6 years of my life doing. I really appreciate that so many other people are interested in it. I saw a little comment in there about the strawberries. Native strawberries will survive the winter. Yeah, they're great. They'll take that snow load. A lot of our native species will. Of course, your zone will differ than my zone, but don't be afraid. They'll bounce back. They're fine. I am excited to see more depaves happen, and I agree with Helena. If you go to depaveparadise.ca, look at some of the projects that other communities like ours have been doing to get inspiration. I feel like the biggest hurdle is that being site specific. There's always something at everyone's site that's just a little bit different that makes it challenging. The concept itself is really simple. Take out the asphalt, put in some green stuff, but it's never that easy. But there's always going to be an example from one of our communities where we've done and we've solved that little thing. So look for inspiration and reach out for support because you're not doing this alone.
Well, thank you so much, Helena and Heather. That's it. Before we sign off, I would like to remind you to visit unfloodontario.ca. The website is full of great resources to help you learn more about natural infrastructure and, more importantly, what you can do at home and in your community to get more natural infrastructure in the ground. We've also got some fun short videos that you can share with your friends and your family to introduce them to the many benefits of natural infrastructure. And of course, please visit the Green Up website, the Green Venture website, and depaveparadise.ca. We're going to be posting the recording of this evening's event on the Unflat Ontario website, and I understand it's also going to end up at some point on the Green Venture and the Green Up Peterborough website. So if you feel you've perhaps missed something, you'll have an opportunity to hear it again once that's posted. Thanks again to Green Venture and Green Up Peterborough for co-hosting this event, and thanks to each of you for helping us unflood Ontario together naturally. Be well and have a great evening. See you later.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks for all the great questions. And great answers.
Yeah, it was such great questions.